everybody loves Hogan Knows Best because this is the Hogan that knows best.
Hogan knows best.
Hogan.
You look in great shape. But I always heard something like it was good to drink beers while working.
The wrestling world stopped. Everything just came to a complete halt on July 24th, 2025. That's the day we lost one of the biggest names in entertainment history. Hulk Hogan, the man who made millions of people believe in heroes, passed away at 71 years old. And when the news broke, it wasn't just wrestling fans who felt the pain. Celebrities from every corner of the world started sharing their heartbreak, and what they said will bring tears to your eyes. I'm talking about reactions from people you'd never expect. Movie stars, politicians, musicians, and even fighters from completely different sports. Everyone had something to say about the man behind the yellow mustache and red bandana. But before we dive into these emotional tributes, let me tell you exactly what happened that morning in Florida. It was early Thursday morning in Clearwater, Florida. Terry Jean Bollea, the real name of the man we all knew as Hulk Hogan, was at home with his wife, Sky Daly. They had just finished dinner the night before and were relaxing, watching television together like any normal couple. But then, something terrible happened. Hogan suddenly grabbed his chest and collapsed. His heart had given out. Sky immediately called for help. Within 7 minutes, paramedics were at their home. Police cars lined the street. Emergency workers rushed inside. They tried everything they could to save him, both at the house and on the way to Morton Plant Hospital. But it was too late. The Hulkster's heart had stopped, and doctors couldn't bring him back. At 71 years old, one of the most famous people in the world was gone. When the news hit social media, it spread faster than wildfire. Within minutes, everyone was talking about it. But what happened next was something truly special. Celebrities, who you might not think even knew Hulk Hogan, started posting the most beautiful, heartfelt messages you've ever seen. Let's start with someone who knew Hogan better than almost anyone. Ric Flair, the Nature Boy himself, posted something that made everyone cry. These two were rivals in the ring for years, but in real life, they were best friends. Flair wrote about how Hogan was there for him during his darkest times. He talked about how when Flair was in the hospital with only a 2% chance of living, Hulk Hogan was one of the first people to visit him. Flair said Hogan lent him money when he needed it most. He made him laugh when everything seemed hopeless. But most importantly, Flair called Hogan loyal and real. Coming from someone like Ric Flair, who's seen everything in the wrestling business, those words meant everything. Flair ended his message by saying rest in peace to his friend, and you could feel the genuine pain in every word. Charlotte Flair, Ric's daughter, also shared her own memory. She remembered how Hulk Hogan stood by their family when her dad almost died. She said Hogan didn't have to be there, but he chose to be there anyway. That tells you everything about the kind of person Hogan was behind the cameras. Charlotte's heart was breaking for Hogan's own children, Nick and Brooke, and she called him brother, just like he always said. But then The Undertaker spoke up, and that's when you knew this was something huge. The Undertaker almost never posts about personal stuff. He keeps his private life private. But he couldn't stay quiet about Hogan. In just a few simple words, The Undertaker said the wrestling world had lost a true legend. He thanked Hulk Hogan for everything he gave to the business. When a man like The Undertaker, who says very little publicly, takes time to honor you, that means something special. Triple H, who now runs a lot of WWE's creative decisions, released an official statement that really showed how important Hogan was. He said WWE wouldn't be what it is today without Hulk Hogan. Think about that for a second. One of the biggest entertainment companies in the world saying they owe their success to one man. Triple H called Hogan a symbol of the entire industry. He said Hogan's presence and charisma captivated audiences on every continent. Millions of people started watching wrestling because of Hulk Hogan, and millions more stayed because of what he helped create. Now here's where it gets really interesting. People outside of wrestling started sharing their memories too. Former President Donald Trump wrote a long message calling Hogan a true American legend. Trump remembered when Hogan appeared at the Republican National Convention, and he praised him as someone who brought energy and strength to everything he did. Whether you agree with Trump's politics or not, you can't deny that having a former president take time to honor someone shows how big their impact was. Sylvester Stallone, Rocky himself, called Hulk Hogan a real-life superhero. That's coming from someone who literally played one of the most famous movie heroes ever. Stallone worked with Hogan in Rocky III, and he said Hogan made that movie iconic. Stallone's message came with a picture of them together from the film, and he said his heart was breaking. When someone like Stallone, who's worked with the biggest stars in Hollywood, calls you special, that means something. But maybe the most powerful tribute came from John Cena, and he didn't even use words. Cena posted a single photograph. It was a picture of Hogan in his prime, holding the championship belt high above his head with that look we all remember. Half serious, half showman. Cena didn't write anything. He didn't need to. That pictures, Brie said everything. It was the new generation of wrestling honoring the man who made it all possible. It was like watching a student bow to his teacher. Even people from completely different worlds shared their sadness. Dana White, who runs the UFC, posted a simple message that just said, "Rest in peace, Hulk." No fancy words, no long speech, just respect from one combat sports leader to a legend from another era. Brooke Shields, the famous actress, shared a photo from when Hogan guest starred on her TV show. In the picture, they're laughing and arm wrestling, and she said that moment was a highlight in more ways than one. Lee Greenwood, the singer famous for God Bless the USA, sent his condolences to the Hogan family and all the millions of fans around the world who were mourning. It didn't matter what industry you were in. If you were famous and you had a heart, you probably said something about Hulk Hogan that day. What made all these tributes so special wasn't just that celebrities were sad. It was the stories they told. Over and over again, people talked about how Hogan was there for them when they needed help, how he made them laugh during tough times, how he never turned down a fan who wanted a picture or an autograph. These weren't just professional relationships. These were real friendships with a man who cared about people. The fans' reactions were just as powerful as the celebrity tributes. Within hours, the hashtag #ThankYouHogan was trending worldwide. People shared old videos, pictures with action figures, and memories of watching wrestling with their families. One fan wrote something that broke everyone's heart. He talked about how his dad worked nights and he only saw him on weekends. But Saturday mornings, they watched wrestling together. The fan would pretend to be Ultimate Warrior, and his dad was always Hulk Hogan. They didn't talk much otherwise, but they would scream and laugh and celebrate when Hogan won his matches. That fan said those moments were everything to him, and now he couldn't stop crying. That's what made Hulk Hogan special. He wasn't just entertainment, he was family time. He was childhood memories. He was the belief that good guys could win if they worked hard enough and never gave up. For millions of people around the world, Hogan represented hope and strength, and the idea that anything was possible. WWE released their own statement, saying they were saddened to learn about Hogan's passing. They called him one of the most iconic figures in sports entertainment history. They said his legacy helped define WWE's success around the globe. But more than that, WWE announced they would dedicate an entire week to honoring Hogan's memory. They planned special segments on their shows, and a full celebration of his life that would air on their streaming service. The tributes kept coming from every direction. News outlets around the world ran front-page stories about Hogan's death. The New York Times, BBC, CNN, ESPN, and media companies from Brazil to India all created special tribute packages. In Australia, they showed fans from multiple generations reacting with tears and disbelief. This wasn't just an American story. This was global grief for a man who touched lives' eves, everywhere. In Tokyo, where Hogan had an amazing career early in his wrestling days, fans gathered outside a famous wrestling venue for a candlelight vigil. One fan held up an old championship belt replica and said in broken English that Hogan made him love wrestling. That simple statement showed how far Hogan's influence reached. He didn't just change American entertainment, he changed the world. People started making pilgrimages to Clearwater, Florida, where Hogan lived. Fans placed flowers, notes, and old wrestling memorabilia at the gates of his home. Local business owners shared stories about how Hogan would show up at community events with a smile and always had time for everyone. A diner owner said Hogan came in every Tuesday morning for the same breakfast: scrambled eggs, bacon, rye toast, and black coffee. But more than that, he would shake hands with every single person in the restaurant. The diner owner said he didn't act like a celebrity. He acted like your uncle. That Friday, WWE held a special tribute show. The crowd couldn't stop chanting Hogan's name. It wasn't sad or quiet. It was thunderous. Thousands of people screaming Hogan, Hogan, Hogan as videos played on the big screen showing his greatest moments. They showed him pointing to the crowd, tearing his shirt, cupping his hand to his ear to hear the fans better, and delivering his famous finishing move. At the end, the words flashed on screen. "Thank you, Hulk. We'll never forget you." The crowd stood up and applauded. Some people cried. There were grown men wearing Hulkamania t-shirts, grandparents holding kids on their shoulders, and fans waving old foam fingers that said, #1 Hulkamaniac. You could see people mouthing his famous words from memory. Train hard, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and believe in yourself. It's easy to make fun of old wrestling catchphrases, but for people who grew up watching Hogan, those weren't just slogans, they were life lessons, they were affirmations. For a lot of people, Hogan wasn't just a character on TV. He was someone who made them feel strong when they felt weak. Someone who made them believe they could be larger than life if they worked hard enough. Not everyone's memories of Hogan were perfect, and the tributes acknowledged that too. Some people brought up mistakes he made in his personal life, including some really hurtful comments that came out in 2015. Hogan was suspended from WWE and publicly shamed for those comments. He apologized and said that wasn't who he really was, and WWE eventually brought him back in 2018. Even people who couldn't forgive those mistakes still acknowledged what Hogan built. The shape of wrestling today, the spectacle, the reach, the grandeur of it all, owed something to him. Eric Bischoff, a longtime wrestling executive and close friend of Hogan's, struggled through tears on his podcast to say there was nobody like him, nobody who could draw a crowd the way Hogan could. He called Hogan pure magic and said he was one of his best friends. In Las Vegas, a digital billboard on the famous strip lit up with the words, "Rest in power, Hulk Hogan. Thank you, brother." That image was shared thousands of times on social media, and it perfectly captured how people felt. This wasn't just sadness. This was gratitude for a lifetime of memories. The scale of Hogan's legacy is almost impossible to measure. He wasn't just a wrestler. He was a phenomenon. He appeared on TV shows like The A-Team and Walker, Texas Ranger. He did commercials and talk shows. He even had his own cartoon in the 1980s. In 1991, at the peak of his fame, Hulk Hogan appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That was unprecedented. A professional wrestler on the front of America's most respected sports magazine meant wrestling had truly entered mainstream culture. Kids everywhere wanted to be like Hogan. They wore bandanas, tore their t-shirts, flexed their arms in mirrors, and tried to copy his deep, gravelly voice. Adults admired his work ethic, the spectacle he created, and his complete commitment to entertaining people. Hogan never did anything halfway, and he stayed visible throughout his entire career. Even long after his main wrestling days were over, he remained part of the conversation through appearances, reality TV shows, and interviews. For better or worse, Hulk Hogan was a constant presence in American entertainment for decades. Now that he's gone, there's a kind of silence where his voice used to be. But his influence continues. News coverage of his death went on for weeks. The New York Times ran a full obituary on the front page. International news outlets created tribute packages that were watched by millions of people around the world. WWE uploaded a special tribute video set to Johnny Cash's song, Hurt, which was unusual for them. The video included not just wrestling moments, but backstage laughs, serious speeches, and photos of Hogan with his children. Fans in the comments wrote things like, "I didn't expect to cry this hard," and "Thank you, Hulk, for everything." This moment of grief wasn't without controversy. Some critics revisited Hogan's past scandals and pointed out the danger in treating someone with a complicated history like a perfect hero. Others pushed back, saying that complexity doesn't erase a legacy. It defines it. One newspaper headline put it simply, "Hulk Hogan was no saint, but he was unforgettable." And unforgettable, he remains. As the days turned into weeks, the tributes kept coming. Not just from famous people with millions of followers, but from ordinary fans. People who waited in line at conventions for autographs. People who watched wrestling every Monday night with their parents. People who still had their original action figures tucked away in boxes in their attics. One fan wrote something that was shared thousands of times on Facebook. He said his dad used to work nights, and he only saw him on weekends. But Saturday mornings they watched wrestling together. The fan would pretend to be Ultimate Warrior, and his dad was always Hulk Hogan. They didn't talk much otherwise, but they screamed and laughed and high-fived when Hogan won his matches. The fan said he never told his dad how much those moments meant to him, and now he couldn't stop crying. That's the kind of thing people were saying everywhere. Hogan was never just Hogan to his fans. He was time spent with family. He was childhood. He was the joy of watching good triumph over evil, even when everyone knew it was scripted. He represented hope and the belief that if you worked hard and stayed true to yourself, you could overcome any obstacle. The WWE tribute show that Friday was something to see. The crowd couldn't stop chanting his name. It wasn't somber or quiet. It was thunderous and celebratory. They showed decades of footage while the crowd roared. At the end, when the words, "Thank you," Hulk appeared on screen, everyone stood up. There were grown men in vintage wrestling shirts, grandparents holding grandkids on their shoulders, and fans waving old memorabilia. You could see people mouthing his words from memory. Train hard, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and believe in yourself. It's easy to mock old catchphrases, but for people who grew up in wrestling's golden era, they were more than slogans. They were life lessons. And for millions of people, Hogan wasn't just a character on television. He was someone who made them feel strong when they felt weak. Someone who made them believe they could be larger than life. That's why his death hit so hard. Even with all the controversy over the years, even with all the complicated history, Hulk Hogan still meant something real to so many people. It's not about ignoring his mistakes. It's about acknowledging what he got right. And the simple truth is, he gave people something to hold on to during difficult times. There are very few cultural figures who have managed to stay relevant across so many decades. Hogan did that not by constantly changing himself like some celebrities do, but by being authentically who he was, for better and worse. That consistency was enough to create a lasting mythology that will probably never be repeated. There will definitely be debates about what his true legacy should be. People will discuss how to separate the entertainer from the person, and how to remember someone who brought so much joy, but also made serious mistakes. Those conversations need to happen, and they should happen. But when all the arguments quiet down, and you think about that kid sitting in the living room on a Saturday morning, watching his dad throw his hands in the air when Hogan's music hit, and he walked to the ring, you understand why this loss stings so much. When you think about that feeling of excitement and hope, you get why millions of people around the world felt like they lost a piece of their childhood. In the end, Hulk Hogan was never just Terry Bollea, the man from Georgia. And he was never just the yellow trunks and red bandana. He was an era. He was a feeling. He was a symbol of believing in yourself and never giving up. And symbols like that don't really die. They just shift into memory, into legend, into the collective spirit of a culture that was changed forever by one man's larger-than-life presence. The celebrity reactions to Hogan's death showed us something beautiful about human nature. In a world that often feels divided and angry, people from every walk of life came together to honor someone who made them smile. Movie stars, politicians, wrestlers, musicians, and millions of regular people all shared the same feeling of loss and gratitude. So what are you gonna do, brother, when the memories run wild forever? Rest in peace, Hulk Hogan. You were the main event always, and you'll never be forgotten. If this video brought back some of your own memories of the Hulkster, please hit that like button to show your respect. Share this with someone who grew up watching wrestling with you, because those memories deserve to be celebrated. And make sure you subscribe to the channel because Yous will continue honoring the legends who shaped our childhoods and changed entertainment forever. Thanks for watching, and remember what the man himself always said. Train hard, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and believe in yourself, brother.